I don't think Aaron's finishing in Green Bay. Read into that and read into them drafting Jordan Love, Danny.
I'm going to side with Brett Favre, somebody who knows that organization intimately from his time spent there, someone who was in very similar shoes, except I think Brett Favre at the end of his career handled his retirement / moving on to the Vikings and the Jets a lot better than Aaron Rodgers will. Colin, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I thought it was a very clear message that they are planning for the future sooner rather than later. And I don't think it happens in the next 2 years, but I think in year 3, you're going to see a parting of ways with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. And I think both of them will be happy to do so. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, his comments, his body language, everything about it tells you that he's not thrilled with the lack of talent around him. Now you're starting to see the Green Bay Packers organization, their actions are starting to tell you and all of us, well, maybe we're not in this for the long haul. So I think that split is coming. It's just a matter of when does it happen.
About 3 years ago, a friend of Mike McCarthy said McCarthy had told people Aaron's Jay Cutler with talent. What do you make of that?
I would just tweak it to say he's Jay Cutler with a ring. Imagine if he didn't have a Super Bowl win early in his career. And, clearly he's a better quarterback than Jay Cutler. Statistically, he's been there. But is he a leader of men? Does he inspire the team around him? Watch the quarterbacks that do that. Look at Tom Brady. Look at Patrick Mahomes. Look at Peyton Manning. Look at Drew Brees. The true greats, which is where Aaron Rodgers wants to be considered and should be, those guys inspired men around them to play better. And I'll go back to something that really bothered me during the NFC game with the San Francisco 49ers when they were getting beat. Do you remember the fumble in that game that Aaron Rodgers hardly even went after?
Yep.
I talked to a bunch of quarterbacks, guys that had played in the NFL, and it bothered a lot of them too. And I think it kind of encompassed an attitude of, man, I don't have time for this. I'm above the fray. I'm better than the rest of the team. I'm not subjecting to myself to injury. When you're in the playoffs and you're trying to make a Super Bowl, I thought it was a really bad look. And then on top of that, you saw the disinterested look in his face. And compare that to Patrick Mahomes when they were getting beat to by the Texans, and he's running around the bench saying, we can do this. We can come back. He wasn't, irritated. He wasn't mad at his offensive line. He was trying to inspire his teammates, which he ended up doing. So I think it's an accurate attitude assessment from Aaron Rodgers. The play on the field is clearly better, but to be a true winner, to be a greatest of all time, you've got to be more than just a talented figure. You've got to be inspiring, and you've got to raise everybody's level of play and their level of inspiration around you. And that's where I think Aaron Rodgers has lacked throughout his entire career.
Jameis Winston now will make $1 million a year. Andy Dalton's been released. Marcus Mariota, the Titans, said no thanks. I think two things are happening in the world of pro football, Danny. Number one, years ago you could stay with a Brian Sipe, a Kenny Anderson, a Jim Hart, because the franchises were worth $70 million. Now they're worth $5 billion. There's too much money to just swim around in mediocrity. Mariota, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, talented young guys. We're done. Secondly, college football is now furnishing the NFL because this generation of quarterbacks has 10,000 snaps by the time they're 11 years old. It's furnishing the NFL with more great talent at quarterback. So teams are more willing to move off even young and talented guys if they see a problem. The downside to that is I think Mitch Trubisky is done. He doesn't know it yet. I think Derek Carr is close to done. But I think Baker Mayfield, and people will say, what about Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold went 7-6 last year, working with nothing and dealing with mono. Baker went 6-10, furnished with great talent. I think this is Baker's last year to win or else. Your thoughts?
First of all, I love that you referenced 10,000 snaps. I think that's a pretty good correlation to the 10,000 hours, the Malcolm Gladwell, theory that's what you need to become a true expert at what you do. And I think you're right on point with that as far as it pertains to being an NFL quarterback. There's a couple things I'd like to add, too. So the college game, yes, they're getting more reps, and they're getting more reps at the high school level, but the offenses that they're running in college the NFL has actually adopted a lot of those schemes. You're seeing more RPOs. You're seeing more schemes at the NFL level that they're actually taking from the collegiate level. So there's a lot more continuity. So there's not this massive jump or this massive change when you go to the NFL level. But I would say that by year 3, for everybody, for all quarterbacks, that you know what you've got. And, like, look at Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston. They probably could have parted ways with their teams a year earlier, and it would have saved them, a wasted year trying to see, oh, man, if we give this 1 more year or 2 more years, is it going to change? If you don't get it by year 3, and it really does have to be 3 years starting. It has to be 3 years under center. If you don't get it by year 3, it's probably not going to change. And sure, there's some anomalies out there, some outliers. But if you don't get it by year 3, I think every organization is starting to realize historically that it's not going to get any better. And that's where I would say with Baker Mayfield entering year 3, this is a massive year for him with a new offense, with a new front office, but also with a ton of talent around him. If he can't get it done this year, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Cleveland Browns say, you know what, we've got enough film, we've seen enough on tape, we know it's time to move on. So I think this is a massive year for Baker Mayfield.
Danny Kanell, one of my favorites, is joining us. College basketball got blindsided, though they shouldn't have been, this week by the G League, where the NBA now is eating college basketball alive, and their best players are decommitting from top programs and going straight to a pro level of basketball. Now, it's not great. It's not the NBA, but it is pro basketball, the G League. College football appears to be strong. But I'll throw this out, Danny. Pro sports are growing in America, all of them, because of the value of the franchises and linear TV. It's the only thing that works now on linear TV is pro sports. So they're going to continue pro sports franchises are going to be well capitalized going forward. College sports is slowly dying because they're not well capitalized. College football is the last remaining college sport that's viable. And though they're not college basketball being eaten by their professional league, here's what I think is a problem with college football. It's becoming regional. That the Pac-12 is dying. And here's potentially the saving grace. The NCAA is now going to allow players to be paid for their likeness. Well, guess where YouTube is located? Google, Apple, Hollywood. That it will be the saving grace for the Pac-12. The Stanfords, the USCs, the UCLAs, and the Oregons can say, you're not getting this stuff in the South. You're not getting this stuff in the Big 12 or the ACC. Come play West. Because I think, Danny, I love college football. I think it's become incredibly regionalized. This is my goofy theory. What say you?
I think it's a little bit goofy, but I hear what you're saying. I think the biggest problem, Colin, is that the Pac-12 has been deemed irrelevant by the playoff format. The fact that there are only 4 teams, the fact that the Pac-12 has really struggled to make inroads there and not get in. I think playoff expansion helps the Pac-12 way more than the name, image, and likeness policy that would be implemented. But I do think it could help somewhat because a lot of those programs would have, and you mentioned the big players, the programs that have struggled, USC primarily, but also Oregon, who's having a nice little resurgence. Stanford, I don't know if Stanford I would categorize this, but UCLA, they've got fans and boosters and supporters who would pay athletes to come to maybe it's a movie premiere in LA. Maybe it's it's a store opening, a Nike store opening in Eugene. Maybe it is, maybe Stanford. Maybe there are some rabid fans that say, hey, we want to make Stanford football relevant again. Maybe it is getting involved with some sort of YouTube appearance or something like that. That would be enticing, but here's the problem. I don't know if that type of fanaticism would match that of Alabama fans, Texas fans, Auburn fans, Florida fans, Ohio State.
It would not. But Apple last week, a story broke they were interested in Pac-12 sports. Why? Because Apple sees the future. If you pay kids for likeness, Apple can create companies to pay Pac-12 football players thousands more than the SEC, Big 12, Big 10, or ACC could. Why did Apple suddenly show interest in Pac-12 sports? Weird, right?
I like the way you're thinking, though. If Apple did something with the Pac-12, because the Pac-12 network deal,
Dead.
the television deal, has not been what the Pac